it looks like raising the retirement age in China is not going to make a difference to the workforce. And this is actually good news. And so that's what we're going to get into in this video. So guys, as you smash that like button, let me run that intro. What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. So I read a very interesting article that pretty much spoke about how, just because China is looking to raise the retirement age limit for its senior workers doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to change anything or any of the number of people that are continuing to work in the country. And so let's dive right into the article. So you can see that this was from the South China Morning Post, and it's saying that, the raising the retirement ages won't make a big difference in the workforce size amid demographic crisis. And they're saying that China's aging crisis is deepening. And so you can see that China did confirm early last year that it does intend to gradually delay retirement ages from 2025, but doing so would keep relatively few older people in work. And so let's dive into this and see exactly what they're trying to say. So official data says that there was approximately 280 million people aged over 60 at the end of 2022, and that's up from 267 million people in 2021. So that's an increase of 18.9% to 19.8% of the overall population. So 1 in 5 people are over the age of 60 at the end of 2022. But there's an analyst here who said that raising retirement ages would keep relatively few older people in work, since most workers today keep working once they have passed retirement age anyway. So it's not going to keep people at work, considering that they stay at work anyways. And so essentially what he's saying is, of course, that the assumption that these people are going to leave work once they hit their retirement age is a bad assumption based on the way that the population performs or behaves. And so the contraction in China's population has triggered renewed discussion of what the government could do to counter the demographic drag. One popular suggestion is to lift China's statutory retirement ages, which are very low. And so as you guys know that I just read earlier, China has already confirmed early last year that they would delay the retirement ages 60 for men and 55 for female office workers and 50 for female blue collar workers from starting in 2025. Now here's the interesting thing, and here's where I think it kind of makes a little bit of sense as to how it could benefit the economy. Despite how low the formal retirement thresholds are, the share of people aged over 65 in paid work is higher in China than it is in other major developed and emerging economies. So here's something that we didn't realize is that, people in China actually work longer than people in other countries. And so it kind of makes sense once you think about it intuitively, but the assumption, at least I made a bad assumption, was that people retire at their retirement age, which of course doesn't even make sense here, because we see more and more people even in North America who are working way past retirement. And here's the interesting thing, and this seems like a benefit of raising the threshold. It looks like it would allow men to remain in better paid work, which might support productivity, but it would not make much difference to the size of the workforce. But if it makes a difference to productivity, that essentially means that your GDP per capita continues to increase. So we'll see how this plays out. And you guys already know that birth rate has just been cratering. And, I think that the birth rate continues to decline as, the economy grows at a slower rate, plus the real estate situation remains dire. I mean, real estate is really expensive in China. And so it's really difficult to start a family, because down there, you're still expected to own a condo or an apartment before you get married. And, you guys who watch this channel from that area, correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm still pretty sure that you don't get married down there unless you own a condo. And so if you live in these very populous cities and the condos are super expensive and you can't afford it, then you can't get married, or you delay marriage, and thus you delay having a kid. And so that becomes a bit of a challenge. And so the Chinese Academy of Sciences did say in 2019 that China's urban state pension fund could be out of money by 2035. So this is what happens when you have an aging population. And so delaying women's access to pension benefits is therefore not a straightforward means to raising overall employment. Williams added, it would make it harder for mothers to work and could lead to a further decline in the fertility rate. So in other words, you raise the mandatory retirement age, it doesn't necessarily mean that people will stay working. And so very important, because I think what's happening here is that, older women might still retire to help their daughters raise their children. And, for someone who is a new parent, I now very much understand how much work it requires to raise a newborn. Like, it's beyond anything that I ever thought it would take. And so, kudos to my wife, who's really handling the burden, or not necessarily, I would say the burden, but the task. But it's beyond anything that I would think. And so you can understand why a mother who's older would retire sooner to help her daughter raise her first child. And so, especially as the husband is going to work. And so, indeed, there is a good chance that the average retirement ages will fall over the next few decades, even if the statutory retirement age is raised, as increasing affluence will leave fewer needing to stay in work past 65. So that's a very important point to note, because we've been seeing that happen in the US since around 2000. The labor force, the people in the labor force, how the participation rate has been going down. Part of that, of course, is just because of the growing level of affluence, despite the fact that people are living longer. They just have the money to sustain themselves into late life. And so, you can absolutely see that in China if they continue to increase the GDP per capita and thus become wealthier. And just providing another diagram to show you exactly how bad this situation is, look at the cratering birth rate since 2016, I would say. They hit sort of like a high peak, and then it's just been cratering. And, if we enter a global recession and the Chinese real estate market continues to stay hot, then you could see this absolutely continuing to decline and crater further. And so thus putting more of a burden on older workers to stay working to support their sort of like pension system. So guys, this is one of the reasons why I always say, make sure you diversify accordingly. At the end of this year, Alibaba is going to be less than 10% of my overall portfolio. In fact, it's probably going to be closer to 7. I don't even know. But the reason for that is because there are huge risks in China, despite the great opportunity that there is in Alibaba. And, you already saw a risk materialize that you didn't think was going to materialize, which was last year, where they kept the COVID lockdowns running for a year longer than we thought that they would. And so who knows how these other risks materialize. Now, everything could be hunky-dory and the economy just grows at 6% every year, and you make a good return on your investment. That is a real possibility. But another possibility is that another shoe could drop. And so the people who are anti-China, they're right. And the people who are pro-China are also right. And so, if you're on the pro-China side and you're investing in Alibaba or Tencent or whatever, you just have to take this stuff into consideration and diversify accordingly. But I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments why I'm wrong about being sort of like in the middle as it relates to China. And the other thing that I wanted to show you is that notice how Chinese GDP per capita has been closing the gap with the US since 2000. However, although the country has made progress in closing the GDP per capita gap, the annual change in GDP is starting to slow. So does this continue? Do they get on par with the US? I don't know. I think it'll take a long time if it even happens. But of course, there's a lot of risks. There's a lot of structural issues with the economy that they're going to have to resolve. And so I know you guys don't like when I put out sort of like negative videos on China, but I'm trying to do my best to not be an echo chamber, at least as it relates to this channel. I am a pro Alibaba investor. I invest in Alibaba, but I also acknowledge the risks of investing in China. Now, I have recently tweaked the Alibaba model. And if you guys want access to that model, you can get access to it at the lower tier of the Patreon. And, of course, at that lower tier, you can access all the models, including Tencent, Microsoft, Alphabet, etc. And so if you haven't done so, the link to the Patreon is in the description below. But also, guys, I recently put out a video on Intel, just talking about and dissecting or providing a first look on their results. And if you've missed that video, you can get to it right here.